everybody, I'm Lon Stroschein, former public company executive turned lifestyle engineer. In 2022, I walked away from my job as a public company executive. I left without a safety net, without another job, without a backlog of clients, or without a resume. But I left anyway. I left because I knew the best days of my life were right in front of me, and they weren't going to be lived where I was standing. Since then, I've launched a best-selling book, coached thousands of elite performers around the world, hosted a top-rated podcast, moved my family across the country, and created a movement that has inspired the change in 1,000 lives. Look, if you're here, it's not an accident or an algorithm. It's you. If you've reached the top of your game and you feel stuck, if you'd trade what you have but don't know what you'd trade it for, then buckle up. This podcast is for you. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. I'm going to see all of you along the Normal 40 Highway. My name is Lon Stroschein. I am the founder of the Normal 40, and I am so excited that you are here. Do you know why? I'll give you two fantastic reasons. One, we are kicking off Chapter 2, or Season 2, or the next wave of podcasts in the Normal 40 podcast, and I am so excited. Look, we got done doing about 55 episodes in Chapter 1, and when we started out, we had no idea. And I mean that. We had no idea where episode 1, season 1 was going to take us. We had no idea it would take us 55 episodes. And we had no idea it would lead us to a very exciting second season. A season where we're going to do a lot of the same things that you've come used to and a few new things that we'll talk about a little bit on this upcoming episode. But the second cool thing is that this podcast in season 2, the very first podcast of season 2, I am doing this podcast with my co-pilot, Adam Eaton. And we have a classic Lon and Adam ramble. We hit record. We barely knew what we were going to talk about, but yet we knew what we wanted to say. We knew what needed to be said. And then we went deep and we shared a whole bunch of updates and gave a whole bunch of what I hope is great content for you, to include the 8 things that everyone here has in common. Everyone here who's stuck, everyone who's wrestling with something. There's 8 things after 770 rambles. There's 8 things that I've unearthed that we all wrestle with at this stage of life. And we talk about that on this podcast, but we talk about a whole bunch of things. And I am so excited that you're here. I'm so excited that Adam joined me. I'm so excited that Adam's coming back for a whole bunch of season 2. And I can't wait to introduce you to the guests that I've already got recorded. They're incredible. All right, everyone. I am so thankful you're here. And I can't wait to drop you into the podcast, right to where Adam and I pick up the conversation full steam ahead. Here we go. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being you. Thanks for being on the Normal 40 Highway. And I'm going to see all of you on the podcast.
All right, friends, do not adjust your radio dial, your audio dial. This is the Normal 40 podcast, the start of season 2 of the Normal 40 podcast. My name is Adam. As always, I have my friend Lon Stroschein. You know him as the founder, the lead dog, if you will, of the Normal 40 movement. Lon, welcome back to season 2 of the Normal 40 podcast. How excited are you for this next era, this next evolution of the podcast?
Dude, I am so excited. I'm excited for a whole bunch of reasons. One, it's been a while. You know, it's been months since we've dropped a podcast. And 2, we're kicking off season 2 with you, dude. I love it. I love that you're here. I love that we're going to do an old classic ramble. I love that as of right now, neither one of us really have a clue what we're going to talk about over the course of the next hour. We know generally, but by and large, this is going to be 2 dudes on a ramble, and we're just going to see how it unfolds.
Well, that's what's always made the Normal 40 podcast interesting, right? If you think back all the way to the beginning, Lon, like we started that. We've told the story on previous episodes, right? We started this through DMs on LinkedIn and not knowing each other, and you taking a chance and saying, okay, fine, maybe I'll record something, and rundowns that we weren't sure what we were going to talk about, and just conversations. That's kind of the ethos, the old school nature of Normal 40, and I think it's part about what has made this so successful. But if I had told you that you'd be starting season 2 of a podcast, 18 months ago now, I think you and I first connected somewhere in that ballpark. If I had told you right, that this is where you would be from that moment to this moment, what would you have told me at that point?
Well, I'd have told you you're crazy, but so
Fair.
Much of the Normal 40 story is I'd have told you were crazy if you'd have told me that from the moment we met, if you'd have told me I will finish the book I was dreaming about and that it would become a bestseller, I'd tell you you're crazy. If you'd have told me I would start a publishing company around that book, I'd have told you were crazy. If you'd have told me I would have moved to Florida and launched 4 successful vintages, I'd have told you you're crazy. I mean, there's just all these things that have happened in just 18 months. I mean, it's true. It's just 18 months that are fascinating and wonderful and interesting all at the same time. But the whole thing of leaning into Normal 40, showing up for it, takes you on this crazy, cool, fun adventure that you're a part of for me, man. I wanted to, I think we talked about it before, but it's worth noting that this podcast I wasn't looking to start a podcast. When we launched episode 1, season 1, an episode called The Beginning, it looked a lot like this. You and I showed up to a Zoom call that we decided we would record, and it became the beginning of the podcast. And I remember when you pitched me on it, because like I said, you're the podcaster. You've got the experience. You had the vision for it, dude. Not me. You had the vision for it. And you came out and you're pitching me on, you should do it. People want to connect deeper to Normal 40. Who better to do it than you? I will help. That was kind of your pitch. And I said, okay, here's the deal. I'll give you 5 episodes. And if we like it, we'll keep going. And if we don't, then we'll just be done. And well, I think season 1 had about 50 episodes, and we're kicking off season 2. And so I would say that we've surpassed the self-imposed limit of 5. And I think we've proven to ourselves that we're onto something here, and it's something that's needed.
Yeah, I think, what's great for me about the whole journey of how we got to, starting a season 2 right now was, I mean, I didn't know you. I'd been reading. You often talk about, you refer to yourself as the mistress, which is an odd nickname to give yourself, but I'll go with it for right now. And so I was very much one of your mistresses, right? I was looking at your posts, I was reading your stuff, and I was, thinking about my situation, where I was, and I'm like, man, what does this guy know? Like, he knows something. Like, how did he, like, how's he doing all this stuff, right? And I just have a natural curious nature about that, right? And so on a Women of Prayer, I flung you a DM, and in true Lon fashion, you answered a question with a question, which was something to the effect of like, "Why are you here?" or "What do you need from me?" or something along those lines. And the pod was born. I will tell everybody out there in full transparency, Lon was not necessarily gung ho about it. I think reluctant maybe is the word I would use. I think you were just forming out your own lane for No More 40, what it was supposed to be, deciding what it is you wanted it to be. And I don't think the interjection of a podcast was probably where you were at that point. So I did a little bit of poking and prodding to get Lon to the microphone, because I knew that the volume of people that were reading his stuff would also listen to his stuff and watch his stuff and would want an avenue to interact more. LinkedIn posts are great, but I mean, there's at some point there's character limits. At some point, people don't read as much, but people listen, man. And I think once you turn the mics on, you started kind of getting your voice out there. I think what you saw is people connecting to you and your subject matter, and realizing that this was a good outlet for them to be able to listen. I remember early on, you got more letters than I did, but people saying, "Hey, thanks for doing this, because like I can just put you in my earphones and no one knows what I'm listening to." And so I don't have to tell anybody I have these feelings of anxiety or wanting to trade out my career or wanting to do something different. Like I don't have to hide my computer screen when someone walks by because I'm on your LinkedIn post. I can just pop in an AirPod, and no one knows, no one's the wiser. And I remember that was really something that struck me early on, was we were sort of providing a lane for people to feel okay about listening to us because they wanted to, but they needed to do so with a little bit of cover. And I thought that the podcast was super helpful in the early stages of Normal 40 to get to the part where you're getting some of those connection points.
You're exactly right. You used the word reluctant in the podcast. It wasn't reluctance for reluctance state. You know what it was? It was skepticism. It was the classic thing when we're early in a process. Me saying, "Well, who would want to show up for me? What do I have to share that somebody hasn't already shared?" It's that classic self-doubt, this classic self-skepticism of what do I have to offer really that could actually be helpful to other people. And what we discovered was we can offer a lot, actually. And we can help be a lantern and a guide to people who, like you said, who aren't ready to be public about what they're feeling. And by public, I mean tell their spouse. By public, I mean tell a best friend. By public, I mean they're sure as shit not going to like, comment, react, or share anything I write because that feels public. But when you can, and you just said it perfectly, when you can just put your AirPods in and you can just download an episode and you can go for a walk or run or sit in your car and listen to two guys explaining exactly what it is other people are going through and it resonates, now all of a sudden you've got a new way of helping people. And that's exactly what the Normal 40 podcast has done. And that's exactly what we're going to continue to enable it to be.
I think one of the things I love about how Normal 40 started off and kind of how it evolved, and obviously you took this and ran with it, was the first couple episodes were just kind of us rambling, right? And I don't even know if you used the word ramble back then. I know ramble kind of came into the lexicon at some point. I don't even think we were calling it rambles at that point. It was just, two dudes, just cutting it up, right? And at some point, it kind of developed into the ramble that you and I were having. And then those rambles became things you were having with other people, right? You were then scheduling rambles, you were having conversations, and you brought back more and more content, more and more learnings you had from those. I mean, I lost track at some point. I've never been good at math. 700 plus rambles, I think you're on at this point, right? So you took all of that and came back and continued to have conversation and new thoughts and new ideas. And I think that was the beauty of the pod. Is it kind of started as like the OG ramble, right? The original ramble kind of started you, me, crappy cameras, crappy microphones, just talking to each other through Zooms, and it then kind of burgeoned into your ability to get more and more people involved in a ramble, which obviously became a really big cornerstone of what it is that you've done and how you've evolved, not just Normal 40, but yourself and others, because now it's become a community of people kind of all learning and teaching from each other, which makes it so much more fun and so much more engaging than just kind of, think about going to college, right? You have a professor get up there and just lectures for an hour and a half, right? No one likes that. Everyone falls asleep. Everyone's on their phone. But when you have class discussions, you break into group projects, you're doing some different stuff. It's a more engaging environment. And I would say that's what you evolved this into. Is this is a community. This is an environment. This isn't just, one man standing behind a lonely tree in the background there. This is a community. This is an environment.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up rambles. I'm going to ramble on rambles for a minute, if you don't mind.
Oh, wow. We finally have gotten there. We knew this day was coming, friends. The ramble about the ramble. Here we go.
Let's ramble on the rambles. And I'm telling you what, this is quality radio right here.
This is it. This is how it is. Do you need like a sound effect? And now we've got the ramble on the ramble. Do you want something like that?
Going back to the skepticism in the early days of the podcast, it was so new to me. So this was in August, I think. So we talked the first time in July, and I think our first podcast came out in September, so we recorded it in August. I was months into my trade. Months. I hadn't started writing a book. I hadn't started chaptering it. I hadn't done any of that. I was just a dude who was writing content on LinkedIn and creating a following. It was stirring a pot that I didn't know existed. I knew I went through something and I had experienced something, but I didn't realize that there were thousands and thousands and thousands of other people who were going through it, and they were just looking for somebody to share their journey with. They were looking for a lantern or a guide. These are two terms I use a lot. A lantern being just so you can see, I think that person understands me. And that's it. That's what a lantern does. You just show up and it's like, and other people can see you. And it's like, I think that person understands me. They're using language and telling stories about me, and they don't even know it. And then there's a guide. It's like you show up and you actually present yourself, and then they can help you through it. And so I wasn't either of those. I certainly wasn't a guide. I was probably a lantern at the time. Well, people kept showing up in my inbox and like, hey, can we talk? I'm like, yeah, sure. Here, let's book a call. And then I got so booked out that I'm like, well, I'm just going to put a link out there. And people can show up and book a free ramble. And then that filled up. And I was out weeks and weeks, and I still am. I still do free rambles, for the record. You can go to my website and book a free ramble, but be prepared to wait several weeks. And I realized that, okay, if people are showing up, I need to create a process around this. So, okay, now they can come into Calendly and they can sign up for a ramble. And then once they're on a call, I gotta take them through a process so I can understand exactly what they feel, exactly what they need, exactly what they want, and exactly where they want to be in a year. And through 773 or whatever the number is, rambles now, I've been able to strip away all from the thousands of different ways people get to me. I'm able to strip away what it is, these basic elements that people wrestle with. There's 8 of them that people wrestle with at this inflection point or transition point in their life. And I say it's inflection point only if they take it. They feel it. They know it's an inflection point. Their concern is, am I going to muster the courage to inflect? Or am I just going to persist? And that is the crux of the situation. Am I going to tolerate what I don't want to tolerate anymore? Or am I going to actually muster the courage to do something about it? And what they're feeling is frustration, and the frustration is the result of their inaction. That's it. That's it. And so these eight things, I'll buzz through them really quick and we can chew on all of them or none of them. But these 8 things are the classic, what's the risk reward? And let's use me. And I like to use me because I don't offend anyone when I talk about me. And let's go back to me in 2020, 2021. I was still a public company executive. I hadn't told anybody how I felt. I knew I had a big story inside of me, and I wasn't sure if I was ever going to chase it or if I was just going to settle into this great thing I had. And for me, number one is what's the risk reward here? You know, what am I really going to give up? And is the risk in giving it up, or is the risk in staying? And what's the reward if I stay? And what's the reward if I go? They're different, and they have different storylines. But we always get wrapped around the risk in going. What if I get it wrong? And then the second thing is, well, if I want to make a trade, I want to do something. The second thing is time. How much time is it going to take? But also, how much time do I have left? How much time can I give to what I've already done? And how much longer can I hang on to that? And how much time is it going to take me to transition? And how much time is it going to take me to replace my revenue I'm making now? That is a big thing. That's time element. Help me. They come to me and like, help me understand the time. And so we ramble on that. The third is health. And health is an interesting one because before we can get to health, I've got to ask a whole bunch of questions before we can get to health. But health, usually it's a health scare that brings people to me. I shouldn't say usually, like most people have a health scare. It's not that, but it's very common that there's a health scare, a diagnosis or a death around them. And we have to talk about the health of it and how much, and that plays into time. And then the next thing is money, and money's an obvious one. And these aren't in order, but everybody always wrestles with their responsibility in the need to provide. Very common, but there's this conversation they have only in their own mind and on a spreadsheet on their desktop that is this wrestling with money. The next one, number 5, is identity. What is my identity? What is it really? If I'm no longer Lon, the public company executive, well, who the hell am I? If I'm not the names on my business card, who am I? If I'm not associated with the business on my business card, who am I really? I mean, that's a serious question that most of us can't answer. I mean, it's a really unfortunate, sad, true situation. It's a predicament. Who am I if I'm not a public company executive? Well, you still get to be a dad, you still get to be a friend, but how do you pay the bills? You know, how do you make money? How do you spend your time? What's the risk and reward? It works all the way back up as it relates to finances. The next one is what's the impact on my relationships? And that starts in your home. What is the impact of my relationships? If I trade, if I make it switch, what are the impacts of my relationships in my home? What are the impacts of my relationship at work? What are the impacts of my relationship in the community? Think of yourself, so many of the people who follow me are doctors. And if they are a critical care provider, so think ER physician in a small town, and they want to go do something else. They want to move, they want to change practices, or they want to get out of medicine. Well, their decision not only affects their family, and it not only affects their hospital or their network, it affects their community. I mean, these are very major impacts on relationships. Number 7 is control. Will I really have more or less control? It's that issue of I want more control. I want freedom. I want to do what I want when I want. And I want to make decisions without feeling guilty or wondering about a consequence. I mean, that is the essence of control. Can I make a decision and not have to worry if there's a consequence?
Hmm.
And people wrestle with that. Can I really have that kind of control? And where do I find it? Where do I find it really? And then the last one is legacy. People by and large don't want to have a conversation with me about what's their legacy. But I make dang sure that they know that we're having a conversation about them that impacts their legacy. Whether you want to be intentional about it or you want to be passive about it, your legacy, this inflection point, has a lot to do with legacy. It has a lot to do with what it is you are going to leave behind. Whether you're intentional about it or you're passive about it, doesn't matter. You're going to have a legacy, so let's talk about it. And those are the 8 things, man. All came out of a ramble. And I didn't know this after 100 rambles. It took me 700 to figure out these are the 8 things that by and large people wrestle with at least 2 of them. At least 2 of them, and sometimes it's all 8 of them that we got to navigate our way through. And so that's what rambles brought to the table. And then that created the whole coaching practice, which led to Vintage and led to the Insider and all the things. So, I mean, it's been just this classic run.
That's a lot to unpack. Let's look at that list for a second. I wrote these down again. So it's risk, reward, time, health, money, identity, relationships, control, and legacy. If I just put it down to one word there, and I think anybody, and I can speak to this specifically as myself here. I've gone through my own journey, and as you said, a lot of these, you can think back to how you personally felt, not you, Lon, but you listening to this felt about some of these things along the way. And I think the one that was most interesting, that really kind of called to me was relationships. And because some of the other things you think about are your own internal struggles, right? Like, how am I going to feel about this? How's my ego going to take it? But relationships, impact others, right? And I think that sometimes is the toughest thing to challenge. Is if I do this, how is my spouse going to feel? If I do this, how are my children going to feel? My children are going to hate me if I do the following. My coworkers who rely on me, they're going to be mad at me if I do the following. I think as I think through some of my challenges and the things I've gone through, I think that's the one that's probably the most weighed the heaviest on me is the relationships. What is this? What and, it, and I guess I take it from this way. It's almost what relationship is more important? The relationship you have with yourself or the relationship you have with others, because either you're going to make a selfish decision and say, I'm going to go do this for me and it's going to be the right thing for me, or I'm going to not do this because it's the right thing for others. And I think that was the one that was the biggest struggle in some respects, is the relationship piece, because it impacts more than just you. And sometimes you start to kind of let your brain weigh on how many people are maybe relying on you, or how many people are intertwined with what it is that you're thinking about doing.
Yeah, man. It's so true. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to Normal 40, the podcast. I just wanted to let you know that one of the questions I get asked all the time is, okay, what's next? I'm here, I'm listening. Your content is good. The podcasts are great, but what can I really do? And I tell people, I've created a community for you, and I don't advertise it very much, but I'm going to advertise it here. The community is called The Insider. If you go to my website, normal40.com, click on communities, The Insider is $25 a month, and you can cancel after the first month or after the first year or after the first decade. It's a month-to-month conversation. And every day I'm in there and we're communicating in a forum. And every other Thursday we have office hours where I'm in there and the whole community shows up and we support one another through their journey. I want you to check it out. If you use code Insider Access, the first month is on me. Go to normal40.com, check out The Insider, and I'm going to see all of you on the inside. All right. I'll get you back to the podcast. Thanks for being here. I'll see all of you on the next page. I think the relationships start, I have my APA framework, and it's very simple and very hard to navigate at the same time. And A stands for you got to accept. You got to accept how you're feeling about something. So if you're coming here, you're listening to this podcast, you've listened to any podcast, and it punches you somehow. It sits in your gut and it kind of annoys you on one level, like kind of relieves you on the other. Like, oh shit. You're annoyed that, God damn it, I feel this way. But you're relieved that there's others. If that's happening, I just ask you to accept it. I mean, if you continue to avoid it and press it down and push it away and then just re-engage with what you've got to get done in the next hour and the next day and the next week and the next month, and you refuse to accept that there's something happening, it's this avoidance that over time just burns you out. It just brings you down. It steals your joy. So that's accept. And then the second thing is permit. You got to permit yourself to do something about it. If you can accept, okay, I'm here. Now I got to do something. That's listening to this podcast. That's sharing this podcast. It's keeping a journal. It's reading a book. It can be stuff. It can be stuff that you do by yourself. That can be your permission. But eventually that permission has to grow up. You eventually have to take an action. That's the third one. Accept, permit, act. You have to take an action that's external. And the first action I try to tell people I want to make sure has taken place is the relationship on what you've accepted about yourself, what you're permitting yourself to do, and the action is to share it with your spouse.
Mm.
And to make sure that they understand that you are where you are. And I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I know who shows up here. I know who's listening to this podcast. I know everything about them. I know they're the leaders and the doers. I know they're problem solvers. I know they don't bring problems home. They come home and fix the problems. You're horrible about asking for help, especially when you need it. So this person, you, doesn't want to tell your spouse or your friends or your colleagues or your employer or your community, I need help. I'm not feeling the way I used to. I want to try something else. And by the way, that's normal. That's not a knock on anyone. Of course you don't want to do that. But there's a process. It starts with, does your spouse know what you're going through here? And you need to make sure that you level set that. And then you need to have the same conversation to the extent your kids are at an age where they can handle it, where you let them in on what's going on, and then your friend network. But these are the relationships that you need to do what you want to do next. Until you feel you've given yourself permission first, and then you've got permission from those you share a roof with. Until you feel like you've got that, you feel like you're a lone individual out making your way. Once you have a second person, just a second person, now you've got a team. And that collectiveness starts to make a tribe. And the whole reason I created community, the free community in LinkedIn, the insider community, which is the biggest, most affordable, most valuable cohort on the internet, I promise you, for 25 American dollars, I'll connect you with people just like you, is for that. It's to have a tribe. It's just to have a place to come feel normal, share what you're going through, have fans in your corner, and be fans for people who need it. And it's all about those relationships. And it builds yourself from the inside out, but it also helps you build your voice.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, you talk about, fans, I'll put that in air quotes, right? But I can tell you after appearances on the show, and I mean, my LinkedIn inbox blows up anytime I'm on a show or I'm with you. And people still check in after a couple of months. Hey, how's it going? Hey, how are things? And so I can actually, very, very easily speak to that for you. But one thing I'm curious about, Lon, I know something I struggled with, right? And as I heard this list and as I look at it on the screen that I wrote here, I can relate and understand all of it. And I think the biggest thing I struggled with early on with this for me was I knew I wanted to do something. I just didn't know what it was. And it felt like if you don't know what you're looking towards, you can't make a change, right? You can't do certain things. So it's almost one of those situations where if you don't know how the movie ends, you don't want to go start and sit down and watch the movie. And for me, it took a long time for me to say I don't really know maybe where I want to go or what I want to do. Again, listeners of the show will probably remember that I've had any number of crazy ideas we've talked about on the show of things I'd love to do in my life, right? And I've never really nailed down like this is the thing, right? And so I think for a long time, that struggle gets in your way. And so what do you say to people who maybe like me, who are saying, Lon, I'm sitting here today and I know I need to make a change. One of these things, maybe multiple of these things are speaking to me. I know a change has to be made. I just don't know what that change is. What do I do? How do I even get started? How do I even begin the process of understanding what I should do when I don't even know what that is? I just know that the me I am today isn't the me that I want to be tomorrow.
Every single person I talk to, Adam, is exactly what you just said. I mean, just think about what the normal 40 is. Nobody shows up to a ramble or to explore coaching or to a community and says, I know my best days are in front of me. I know they aren't going to be standing where I was. So I made this trade and now I'm doing great. I know exactly what I'm after. Nobody does that. And if those people exist, they just don't need us. They don't need this podcast. So the people who find me are a very specific avatar. And I'm gonna go over them and I'm gonna answer your question. What do we do about it? What do we do about it? And I'm gonna just there again, going back to these conversations that I have, I know exactly who they are. They're the leaders and doers. They've dedicated their life to a single thing, a single company, or a single person professionally. They're the providers in their home. They're relentless problem solvers. They've got good marriages, but not great. Really important point. Good, not great, and they know it. They're accepting it where it's at. They've lived life right. They've lived life by the book. They've outperformed their own expectation. They've done what's expected of them, and they're notoriously bad about asking for help. These are the people. So by the time they find me, they've already feel like I don't ask for help, but I'm going to call this guy and just see what happens. So they refuse to this outreach. They don't view as a call for help. But I know when I'm joining meeting, when I hit join meeting, I know that the person I'm going to be talking to, I'm probably going to be the first one, maybe the second one, that they're going to tell what it is what they're feeling. Most of the people have kind of the same things. They've got great income. They've got W-2 safety. They've got a great lifestyle, nice car, home, country club memberships. They've earned respect over time. It's not accidental. It wasn't inherited. They've earned it. They got a strong image, impressive title, big office, great team, and they've got aging kids and aging parents. So they're at this place at the height of their career, but everything, the change they've had in the last 10 years pales in comparison to what's about to happen to them in their next 10 years. They're at this place. Kids are going to be in 10 years ago, they were having kids, bringing kids home from the hospital, doing Christmases with kids, in their pajamas. 10 years from now, their parents might not be here. 10 years from now, their kids will be in or out of college. The change that's going to happen in the next 10 years is drastic. So what are they feeling? They're feeling frustrated and confused about what they're going to do while at the height of their game. They feel controlled, uncertain, stressed, lost, annoyed. They feel alone. Who do you tell? They got everything they've chased. Who's going to care that they don't feel the way they want to feel? Nobody's. So they talk themselves into doing nothing. And then at the end, they feel shame and guilt for having so much and feeling so little. These are the people who find me again and again. So let's get to the question. What do they want? And what are they going to do? Well, they want freedom, control, time with family. They want to feel like they're on the right path, and they want to feel convicted by it. They want to run towards something instead of run away from something. I mean, all of these things. They want clarity, and they want intimacy in friendships, intimacy in relationships with their spouse. And so, to answer your question, okay, what the hell do we do about it? The people who show up, because they're the leaders and the doers, and they're at this awkward place, they want a quick answer. They want a quick process. They want a checklist. They want to know if they really want to know, hey, can I give them a prescription, a non-medical, but a prescription that helps them in the next week get clarity, find control, have a path, have the confidence they need to make a change, all those things. And the answer is hell no. It starts, where it starts? Every time with a ramble. And you know what the intent of a ramble is? To see if they can remember what it sounds like when they get to sound like them. the whole purpose of the ramble, Adam, where do you start? Where do you start? What can you do? You have to find tribe. Your tribe can be one other person. Your tribe can be 100 other people, but you have to accept how you feel, permit yourself to do something and act. And when I say act, it means you have to do something others can see. You have to do something others can see. It doesn't mean you have to quit. It doesn't mean you should quit. But it means you have to start. And it means you should start. So as loosey-goosey as that sounds, you have to, what do? You have to remember who you are when you get to sound like you. And the only way to do that is to talk about it with someone you trust, someone who's been there, someone who can be your lantern or your guard. And that doesn't have to be me. It can be you, Adam. They can call you. It can be any one of my guests. It can be somebody else who they know and respect. But you have to talk to someone.
It's so funny. I think you said something that resonated with me. I wrote it down while you were talking. One of the challenges that I faced early on is, and I said this phrase to my wife all the time, and again, I'd be complaining, if you will, or bemoaning whatever the situation was, as sometimes you do when you're not in a good spot, right? I think all of our spouses are used to that. And I remember saying to my wife all the time, I've got all these things, right? I've got this, I've got that, I've got this, but I just something's not right here. And I remember saying all the time, there are people out there that would kill for my problems, right? They would absolutely, they'd love to have the problems. Again, I'll use air quotes that I have right now. And it was almost, you didn't say it in, at least in this, but there was a guilt associated with that for me to say like, why am I over here bitching and complaining about the fact that I've got this great job and I got all these great things and I'm just not happy with it? Like just shut up and go do it. Like there was a part of me that was mad at me for having that feeling and that thought process and saying, you've worked your life to achieve to a certain part based on what you decide to do with your career. You got there. Now shut up and go do it. And so there was a lot of internal, at least for me, I don't know if you hear this from other rambles, internal fight amongst myself around like, stop being a baby, stop, crying over this stuff. Just go to work, man. Go do the work. It's fine. You'll be okay. And people would kill to have my problems. And I wrestled with that for a long time. Just the thought of like, people probably see me and my work environment and everything and go, man, that guy's got it made. Look at this guy over here, right? And I'm on the other side saying, like, if you only knew. But that it took me a long time to kind of get past that or kind of accept that, as you said earlier, as I kind of went through a process.
Yeah, man, you nailed it. It's shame and guilt. It's the shame and guilt for having so much, to having everything you kind of set out to want to have by this point in your life. And then guilt for not still being inspired by it, for not being able to care about it the way you used to. And that then leads you all the way back to the very first word, the most common word I hear when I say, tell me what you're feeling, man. If you've waited 6 weeks to talk to me, you showed up for the phone call, you've listened to the podcast, you've read the book, you're here, tell me what you're feeling, man. I'm frustrated. I'm beside myself frustrated because after they ramble, after they come all full circle, it comes back to this. I'm frustrated because I have so much and I feel so little. I'm frustrated because I have what I want and I would trade it, but I don't know what I would trade it for. So I'm frustrated to not have a clarity. I'm frustrated to get this far in my life, to go this far down this path. And I'm frustrated that it no longer makes me feel like I wish it did. But it doesn't, it can't, and it won't. And I don't know what to do about it. So I'm frustrated. And they keep coming back to that again and again. And I get it. I get it. And by the way, it's totally normal. I literally talk to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who feel those exact things. And some don't do anything. They don't do anything. And I don't blame them. That's not a knock. It's just they're not ready. They're not ready to start doing stuff. They're not ready to do the work on it. And others are like, damn it, I got to figure this out. I got to do something. And then they are ready to do the work that needs to be done. But it comes back to this tolerance, You can tolerate what you did yesterday, or you can refuse to tolerate it and change what you do tomorrow. But shame and guilt, man, it's everywhere. And one more thing, you don't want others, we've talked about this too, you don't want others to know you don't want others to know that you're feeling like you feel. You want
Mm.
others to believe that it's as good on the inside as you make it look on the outside. And that, by the way, takes a ton of energy. It takes a ton of energy to maintain that image while your ego is over here saying, dude, you don't really want that promotion. You don't even really want to work in this company anymore. You don't even really want to use these skills that they're asking you to use that you accidentally got good at. You don't really want that. You want to go do this. But your image is like, hey, we got here. Hey, we got this. Hey, we got to keep going. It's like, dude, you can do that fine, but it's not going to make it better. You really want to go figure something else out. Let's go do that. So it's this classic image need thing. And I tell everybody, look, your ego for where you're at, your ego is your best friend. Your ego, you aren't here. Nobody listens to this podcast thinking, I wonder if this is going to help my image. Bullshit. Your image is saying, don't listen to this. Don't listen to this. Go back to do what you're doing. Your ego is over saying, see, you son of a bitch, listen to this. These dudes are talking to you. You don't even want to show up to work on Monday. What the hell are you thinking? Your ego is your friend. Your ego is saying, let's go figure this out. Let's go take a risk. Let's go be who we were 15 years ago when we weren't scared, when we weren't afraid to get it wrong. Let's go be that person. Remember that person? I like him. Let's go do that again. And so that is the classic thing that we have to tune into. You gotta, once we can rewire what risk is for you, and we can rewire there's risk in leaving and I might get it wrong, and that is a risk, and we can make the bigger risk, I might stay and never find out. Once that becomes the big risk that you're scared of, I might never leave, I might never find out, I might get old and wish I'd have tried. That shit is risky. If I can make that the thing you're really scared of, then you'll try anything. You'll try something. And that is where Normal 40 comes in. That's where Tribe comes in. That's where community comes in. That's where this podcast comes in to connect you with people who want to help you do it.
I think the other word that's interesting that you kind of said in these 8 key words, but yeah, but I know I struggle with it a lot. You just mentioned a little bit ago is the word patience, right? And most people who are listening to this are probably type A personalities. They're used to being successful. They've gotten to where they are because they're driven to be successful, because they've done really well in their careers and in their education and everything they strive to do. So they're type A. They're successful. They always win. But you said something earlier, like, "Hey, can you fix me in a week?" Right? Like they're also probably impatient because they're used to getting success. They're used to getting results. They're in high performing positions where they can quickly look at a score sheet and look at their metrics for the month, look at their sales for the quarter, whatever your metric sheet is at your place of business. You can go quickly look and see where the problems are and quickly fix those things, right? Here, it takes a long time to fix you, right? To fix you as a person. How have you seen people struggle with that patience piece and actually being patient and giving themselves the time or understanding they have to give themselves the time if they want to get to the end result that they want to get to?
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the Normal 40 podcast. My name is Lon Stroschein, founder of the Normal 40, and I'm super glad you're here. Hey, really quick, by now you know it's my mission to inspire the change in 1,000 lives. And you know that this podcast is just one of the ways I'm doing it. You can also go to my website, normal40.com, and sign up for my free newsletter that comes directly to your inbox. Now, it's not really a newsletter in the sense that you're going to find much news in it. It's just letters from me to you, man, right where you are on your journey. The topics are going to vary from week to week, and I might have a guest article from time to time, but the intent of the Rambler is to meet you right where you're at, and I hope you sign up. You can also sign up for the 14 questions that changed my life. These are questions you can answer for yourself, but these are the questions I wrestled with when I was right where you are. Just a couple other things really quick. A few weeks ago, I launched my book called The Trade, and The Trade within minutes was an Amazon #1 bestseller in multiple categories, and it remains there to this day. I would love it if you'd go buy the book, not because you're going to get something out of me when you read it. It's because the book is going to get something out of you when you read it. Lastly, I've got a closed group off LinkedIn that I call the Insider, and this is where I hang out. I hang out a few times a month in cohorts and in one-on-one calls, and you can come in there and you can join the Insider and you can see for yourself that you are not alone. I would love to see you in there. Look, last thing I'll say is if you're here and this podcast is resonating with you and you can feel something burbling up, I want you to know that you are ready. You are here not because an algorithm. You are here because you are ready. And I want to help you see you through to the other side. Everyone, thanks for being here. Check out the other episodes, and I'm going to see you a little further down the road. I do a drill in all of my vintage kickoffs. And one of the questions I ask them is where where's the proof? If you are living the life you want to be living in 1 year, so fast forward 1 year from this day, and we all can do this. If there are things in your life that are going right, that are different than they are today, that they're going right, what are those things? What are those ingredients? Um, and because if you ask somebody, what do you want to be doing in a year? Well, that's the impossible question. That's the impossible question. And I know it. I do ask it. Spoiler alert for anybody who shows up to a ramble. I'm going to ask you, what's the dream? And I'm going to ask it because I know you're not going to know it. But it's also a great way for us to attack it. Let's admit we don't know it so that we can get comfortable with the fact that our job here is to accept we don't know it, permit ourselves to doing something about it, and then taking an action to figure it out. I mean, it comes back to that simple, frustrating, hard framework. And so what's the dream? I don't know. What are we going to do about it? Okay, so then I break it down. What's the ingredients? You know the ingredients. If it's going well, what are the ingredients? Well, here's an ingredient. I'm not working 80 hours a week. I've cut my time to 60 hours a week or 40 hours a week. Great. Perfect ingredient. What's another ingredient? I've got one customer on the side. I've got somebody who's paying me to do something other than my day job. Great. What's another ingredient? I took a 2-week vacation with my family. Great. Those are ingredients. These are things you can grab, feel, touch. They're kind of wishes, right? That's fine. That's fine. Let's make them the ingredients of the life you want to live. So I have them do this drill because inevitably, at about month 3, they're going to feel like this is just harder than they thought it was going to be. And then I'm going to remind them, hey, look, you remember where you said you wanted to be in a year? And remember where 90 days ago where you were? Look at this. Look at the things you've already done. Look at the things in your own words, in your own actions, in the things that you've already taken on. Look what you've already done. So yes, Adam, everybody wants to show up and they want change to happen in 5G speed, man, or 7G or whatever the hell's next. They want it to happen. Boom. I hit subscribe. I am fixed. I bought a system. I'm fixed. And what I tell them all is that's fine. You can wish for that all you want, but that's not what I'm offering. I'm offering you a process, and it's going to be as fast as I can go, but it's going to look to you like it's 56K dial-up. Remember that old screech?
Sure.
That's the process. That's how it's going to work. That's how it's going to go. And if you can accept that, it's going to be slow, it's going to be steady, but you are going to make progress. You are going to be doing things. You're going to be up to something. And then I'm going to show you the proof. Then all of a sudden, people can feel good and they feel momentum towards something new, even if they don't know what it is yet. And after 90 days, you probably won't. You probably won't. But it won't be this big, wide open canvas of white. There'll be things on there. There'll be things that you've ruled in and ruled out. And so that's the process. It takes longer than you want, but there is a process you go through, and it really does move you forward.
Yeah, you said something that's interesting. And I remember you asking me this question when you and I first connected, which was, what does good look like, right? What does success look like for you? What does that other Adam look like? And I know you and I have been on these particular microphones talking about some of my past and some of the things I've gone through. So, one thing I want to share as I've kind of gone through my journey, you said something interesting that, and I'll share the story kind of about where I am today and what I've learned about myself is what I think initially as I evolved through this process and I evolved through recognizing that I wasn't where I wanted to be. There were, the things you're talking about, that the challenges I was facing are all the same ones that you listed out earlier on there. And so what I was always thinking is I had to make this big grand change. I have to completely become a whole new career, a whole new life, whatever you want to make the whole new thing. That's what I thought I needed to do. I need to completely get away and go and do this and do that. And it wasn't until probably about 5 months, 6 months ago, Lon, I realized what I really wanted to do is re engineer my life, redesign what my life is. And you said something earlier about working 80 hours to 60 hours. And I really kind of sat down and said, what's the best version of me? Like what would make, what's my dream schedule? What's my dream outlet? If I woke up every day and I followed this same routine and this same, the same structure, that I'd be happy with that. I'd be okay with that. And so I wrote all that out one day, right? Wrote out Adam's dream day. What does that look like? What time am I waking up? What am I having for breakfast? Who's at the house? Where am I? I wrote it all out. And I just started thinking about how do I achieve that? And really what kind of hit for me, and sometimes life just kind of throws funny things your way. Um, an old mentor of mine who I hadn't spoken to in maybe 5 years or so on reached out to me and said, "Hey, I was just thinking about you the other day, like, just want to check in, see how things are going." And so we just started up a conversation. And a couple weeks later, that same person calls me and says, "Hey, I've got a great job opportunity in my company. I've got something that's opening. I got something that's coming that I really think you might be great for, man. And it's in the same field that I'm in. It's in the same genre that I'm in." And so part of me said, listen, I said, I don't want to do this. I said, I don't want to do this. But I sat down, and for the first time ever, Lon, I was open in the conversation. I knew what I wanted because I wrote it all down. I had down, this is Adam's day. This is Adam's dream right here. And so when I talked to that boss for the first time, I knew the things I was going to ask because I knew what was important to me. Where before you're usually selling yourself because I want an opportunity. I've got to get out of here. I've got to do something. And really what I learned through this journey was re-engineering my life to the way that I think is going to be best for me, best suited for me, my family, what makes me happy, healthy, all the things that I need, and then going and figuring out where do I fit in with that. And that was the first time I took that sheet of paper and I said to this guy, "Tell me about work-life balance at the organization. How does that look? Tell me a little bit about, what time do meetings typically kick off in the morning times? Tell me a little bit about PTO and what's the time off policy." And I really kind of dove in and looked at all the things that were important to me redesigning my life. And lo and behold, Lon, a lot of these boxes were checked off, and a lot of them, some of the ones that maybe weren't, my boss said, well, let's good, let's talk about that. Like, what do you think? How should we do that, right? And so we negotiated some of the things that maybe were on my wish list that weren't maybe naturally born into that role, right? And so here I am today, now with a new company. And in a very similar role, with a leader who now from day one understands who I am and sort of what I'm striving to become versus my old leaders who thought I had to be one way, right? This new leader understands who I am. And so it's been a drastic I'm doing almost the exact same work. I've got a little less scope, which is fine for me. You talked about ego, right? So I've got a little less scope, so my team isn't as large, but I'm okay with that. You talked about financials. There was a bit of a shift financially that I had to be willing to absorb, and that was a tough one because, my wife, my family were like, "Wait a minute, we're going from X to X. Well, I guess we got to get rid of Netflix, and I guess we got to do this, right?" And so we had to sit down and think through that plan, and there's still some hurdles to cross there. But I can look across from you now. You and I were recording this in December of 2024, and say I'm a much happier person. I'm much more grounded, and I've been able to re-engineer my life in a way that I've been looking to do for the first time since probably you and I met. And it didn't come with some wild change. I didn't leave career fields. I didn't move across the country. I didn't do all these, like, it literally was just defining who I really wanted to be and what was important to me, and then being true to that, right? And I think that was the challenge I had before, is I probably already knew some of this stuff, but I wasn't being true to it because I didn't feel like I could, maybe my previous organizations, or maybe I was still wrestling with the things you talked about, which are ego and identity. But once I finally had the self-actualization of this is what's going to allow me to be the best me, that has ultimately changed my perspective and got me to a place where I feel infinitely better. And I feel like I've made a trade, even though I haven't traded much. I feel like I've made a trade to get me to that second version of what it is that I want to do.
Yeah, dude, congratulations, dude. That is awesome. I didn't know that update. I knew you were in the hunt. I did know that, and I love it. I like how you describe it. Re-engineer. Just that term implies intent. It implies you knew the ingredients, right? You knew the ingredient. You didn't know if it was going to be with the company you're working for today, the company you were working for at the time, or something totally different. You knew the ingredients though, and that was part of the engineering. You knew what you wanted this to look like, and the this is you, your time, your life. And so re-engineer, I think that's a beautiful term to describe exactly what we do in this process. We talk about transformation, and sometimes that's too big a word. Like it's, I've got to blow it up and transform, and it's like the proverbial worm to caterpillar. Well, sometimes, sure, but not necessarily. And so the trade is a lot of things. The trade can be that. It can be from worm to caterpillar. The trade can be what I did, from corporate to a dude sitting, moving to Florida. The trade can also be changing your setting, changing who you do it for, changing who you do it with, but using who you are in the process. The trade isn't quitting. The trade is pursuing. The trade is starting. And man, you did all those things. You wrestled with all the things we all wrestle with. You dealt with many of the things many of us deal with. Then you were handed some cards that you didn't expect to have to deal with, and you had to deal with that. And then you got some clarity on what are the ingredients. If you re-engineered your life, what are the ingredients? What does that look like? How do I know I'm re-engineering it right? Then you acted on it. And the other thing you said that's so obvious from where you're sitting now, but less obvious at the time was, well, when I know what I want, I know what to look for.
Mm.
I know what to ask for. And so because you'd done the work of saying, well, here's what good looks like. This is what I want. Here are the ingredients. When the opportunity came up, you didn't settle for what wasn't good. You were already had what was less than. So now you knew what you wanted the ingredients to be, and you could ask for it. You could articulate it. You could put it into words. You could negotiate it. You got most of it. You didn't probably get all of it, but that doesn't matter. The clarity in this was you knew what to ask for. And I think that's awesome, dude.
Yeah, I think the other thing I learned along that journey, you said earlier is transformation, right? And I think that has so many different meanings. What does that really mean? And I think what I realized was the things that perhaps were driving me to have these feelings that first had me seeking out Lon and sort of being the mistress of the normal 40 movement, as you often say. Those things were rooted in my feelings about certain things, right? That didn't mean that I needed to go become, an orthodontist or something, like completely change my path in life. It just meant that I needed to kind of reassess who I was and what was important to me. You've always talked about sort of the journey, and for a while you talked about kind of living your best life, living your second half. And I think for me, I felt like that second half had to be a complete difference maker. And what I learned honestly is, and again, I joke with this because if you're a longtime listener of the show, again, you'll know that I'm crazy idea guy, right? I'm always, hey, I'm gonna do this. Hey, I like this. Hey, let's do this. And but part of my journey is I need that white space time to go pursue some of those adventures, some of those avenues. And not all of them ever come to fruition. Not all of them hit. I don't follow through in all of them, but I want the freedom to know that I can try it if I want to. And I think that was the other piece, is kind of redefining who I was. But all these things that I thought I wanted to do as part of my life or my next chapter, maybe I really didn't. They just seemed interesting to me because they were not doing what I was doing. And so I think that's the other thing I learned is when you sit down, you go, Lon, what's your best self look like? And I think I remember my first pass at this, like I was a millionaire, I was living on the beach, I would like, and it's all these things that are yes, would we all want and take them? Sure, but they were probably pretty unrealistic in some manner, right? But then you start thinking about what's a realistic version of you, right? And I think that it took me a while to get to the part of like, oh, I'm going to be a world famous podcaster. I'm going to be the biggest thing in podcast. Joe Rogan, watch out, here I come, right? Or I'm going to write the next, bestseller. That's it. Everybody, John Grisham, move aside. Here comes Adam. And you kind of realize after a while that setting your sights on a mark that is something that maybe has the ability for you to actually get to that part, I think was important to me. I think I shot really, really high early on, and it's good to have goals and dreams. But I think that was what's challenging to me is I shot so high that I didn't know how to get there. right? Because the climb from Adam desk job guy to Adam head of the podcasting world seemed like such a far climb, and I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to go there. I didn't know what to do. You talked about time earlier. How long is that going to take? And so I almost found myself initially sabotaging. And you said something earlier. Maybe there's some time I go through therapy to figure this out. Almost sabotaging myself to not achieve the things I wanted to achieve for whatever reason, because they were so far out there for me. So I think once it's kind of framing yourself back to who you are, what's important to you, what's real and what's valued. You mentioned health, and I do want to touch on that for a second. Again, longtime listeners will know I lost a close member of my family last year, and it really kind of took me by surprise, made me reevaluate and assess a lot of different things. But it also, I don't know how to say this in a way that's appropriate. In some cases, it taught me a lot about myself, and I didn't want to have to learn that lesson, and it's unfortunate I had to learn it this way. But it also kind of teaches you what's important about life, what's important, and that's kind of where a switch flipped for me a little bit around. Like maybe I'm not going to become the next Joe Rogan. Maybe I'm going to become the best Adam Eaton. And how do I get to that person? How do I get to that? And if that means I have a great podcast, awesome. If that means I have a beach house, even better. But if it doesn't, I'm okay because I have these things. And so all these ingredients you're talking about, I think the other thing I learned is they don't all happen at the same time. And I think that's what people think. Like these eight are going to hit all at the same time. And you're going to solve them all, and you're good. Like you may cross six off the list and be like, "Whew, knock these out. I'm good to go." And all of a sudden, that seventh one pops up out of nowhere. And you're like, "Man, where did you come from? I wasn't expecting control. How did you get here?" I almost feel like you see that movie Inside Out, where the voices kind of talk inside someone's head. Like, how did control get here? Who invited you? And so that's the other thing I think I'd leave people with as you're thinking about this is these things all don't hit at the same time. They will pop up at any given time. And sometimes you think you squash them and they pop back up again. But if you find a way to center yourself and figure these things out, there is definitely that path at the end. It just may not be the path that you think it is, and that path may be closer to you than you maybe even realize today.
Dude, I think that's beautifully said. And you're exactly right on all fronts. I'll wrap up with this. Look, if you're here, you're still listening to this podcast while Adam and I are kind of rambling on here. What you're going through is hard. It's wicked, wicked hard. And it's lonely and it's frustrating. And it's not anything you expected to be going through at this stage of life. And so to navigate forward requires more fortitude than what you thought you would have to bring to something at this stage of your life. But know that there's a community of us here. There's people who show up here for you to help you do that. And I'll end with this, and it's something that has become obvious to me over time, and that's that in every situation or transformation or evolvement of a client, a friend, somebody comes for a ramble, in every situation, the future that they finally arrive at is found somewhere first in their backstory. And so for you, just think about that. Think about that as you go forward, as you think about what's next. I promise you that where you're going, you're going to find experience in that, in your backstory. It's going to be there. It's going to be something that's been knocking. It's going to be something that's presented itself. It's going to come out of a failure. It's there. It comes out of your backstory. And so the work that we do here, the work that we do in Rambles, is to tap on that backstory a little bit, remind you that it's there, make it okay that you see it, and then try to cast it in way forward so you can use it for your next story. And remember, your next story doesn't have to be your forever story. It's just your next story. And that's where I'll leave it, man.
I think that's the perfect way to wrap up shop. Again, if you're not already doing so, make sure you subscribe to this particular podcast wherever you're listening to it. Make sure you're checking out all the stuff that's available on normal40.com. Lon mentioned there's a link if you need to get a free ramble in there. Get in line now and get that working. And Lon, I know you have a bunch of other programs that you've launched. Maybe some new stuff you're launching. I don't want to let any cats out of any bags. I also think that's a data reference, by the way. But what can people expect if they go to normal40.com? Anything that you want to make sure they're aware of before we wrap up here?
It's going to be very basic. If this podcast resonated with you, buy and read The Trade if you haven't done it. It's 160 pages, and if you don't want to read it, I will read it to you on Audible. Don't read it because I'm going to make $4.31 when you buy it. Read it because it just might change your life. And I know that because I get notes every day from people who read the book, and it's changed their life. 2, I've got the Insider community. It's a low-cost, high-value, high-touch for the cost community of people like us doing things like this. And show up in there. You can go to normal40.com. It's right across the top. Hit programs and just join the Insider. Check it out. It's month to month. If you don't like it, fine. You just click a button and you're out. I've got Vintage. My Vintage 4 is filled up, but I'll be doing Vintage 5 mid-year. So send me a note. Get on the wait list for that. And, you know, you can also sign up for the Rambler. It's notes from me to you. I'm also doing something else in the Rambler, which is pretty cool. I'm trying to do it once a week to once every other week. I'm taking a story that somebody shared with me in a ramble, and I write a story about it. It's a real story about a real person from a real place in a real time, and I write about it in this way that's totally relatable. And so if that's of interest to you, please sign up for the Rambler. You'll find it there. And that's what we do here, man.
Awesome. Well, again, we appreciate your ears for the last couple of hours here as we've chatted on, and we'll be back soon with more fresh content as season 2 gets kicked off here at the Normal 40. For Lon, my name's Adam, and we'll see everybody on the other side.
Hey everybody, that's going to do it for me, Lon Stroschein, the founder of the Normal 40, and it's going to do it for this episode of Normal 40, the podcast. Look, just a quick thanks. Adam, super cool. So glad to ramble with you again. I can't wait to do that again and again and again through this season. It's going to be a blast. Thanks to you. Thanks for everyone for being here. Also, this awesome theme music. Thank you, Damon Boudreau, for dropping in here and putting this together for us. To Joan, thanks for helping make this podcast happen. And everyone else, I'm going to see all of you on the next page.